No space for your kids at Christmas, my mom said. My brother laughed. Let's be real, they're a bit much. I said nothing. That night, I returned every single gift I bought for their kids, $1,600 worth. At 8 a.m., my brother texted, They're crying. Where are their gifts? I got angry and replied, I didn't think I could ever hate my brother, but that Christmas morning, when I watched him pretend nothing had happened while my daughter sat on the couch holding an empty stocking, I realized how angry I actually was. Not the kind that explodes, the kind that settles in and stays. Ella kept glancing at the door like someone might still show up with an apology and a stack of wrapped boxes. She asked if maybe we were going to Grandma's later and the presents were already there. I told her we were staying home this year. I didn't explain why. I couldn't bring myself to say her uncle had made a joke at her expense and everyone laughed. 2 days earlier, I was on the phone with my mom, going over food and timing. Same routine as every year. Then she paused and said it might be too crowded this time. She said there wasn't space for everyone. I asked who she meant. She said me and Ella. I waited for her to correct herself. She didn't. Then Mark spoke up in the background. He laughed and said, Let's be real, they're a bit much. That was it. That was the moment my brother ruined my daughter's Christmas with one sentence. Not even aimed at her directly. Just tossed out like it didn't matter. Ella was in the kitchen, humming and frosting cookies shaped like reindeer. She had spent days making cards for her cousins. She wrapped their gifts herself and hid them in my closet, checking every night to make sure I hadn't found them. She was proud of them. I didn't argue on that call. I didn't defend us. I just hung up and stood there longer than I should have. I hated myself for that part. Later that night, after Ella went to bed, I loaded every single gift I bought for Mark's kids into my car. I had gone overboard this year. Everyone knew that was my thing. I made good money, and I liked spoiling the kids. Sneakers, collectibles, electronics, things they talked about all year. I returned all of it. Every receipt, every box. Over $1,600 back onto my card. I told myself it was practical. I told myself it wasn't revenge. But I slept better than I had in weeks. At 8 a.m. the next morning, my phone buzzed. Who is Mark? They're crying. Where are their gifts? I stared at it until the anger finally reached my hands. I typed back that maybe he should ask Mom. I heard space was an issue this year. He called right away. I didn't answer. Then Mom called. I let it ring. And I made French toast and ate it on the floor. She didn't complain. She just asked if next year would be better. I told her yes, because at that point I needed to believe it. What Mark didn't know was that he wasn't just the family favorite. He was the office favorite too. And I had spent years helping him get there, fixing his mistakes, making introductions, covering for him when he slipped. That morning, while he was texting me about crying kids, I started thinking about how fragile his perfect life actually was. And that thought stayed with me. The funny thing about people like Mark is they rewrite the past to make themselves look like the hero. Once they get what they want, everyone who helped them becomes invisible. He likes to tell people he got where he is by grinding, that he came from nothing and built himself up through hustle and ambition. What he never says is that I was the one who got him in the door. I walked him into his first interview at my company. I prepped him for it, stayed up with him practicing, and even recommended him personally. He was fresh out of a messy job exit, and no one else would touch him. I vouched for him. Again, I gave him my old laptop, paid his phone bill 1 month when he couldn't, got him out of a mess with a client by reworking a pitch deck from scratch at midnight while my daughter was sick with the flu. And I never once asked for credit, never wanted any. I thought we were family. I thought that meant something. Turns out it meant I was useful until I wasn't. After Christmas, I couldn't stop thinking about Ella sitting in front of that tree, trying not to look disappointed. She hadn't said a word about the missing gifts, just quietly took the ones she had wrapped herself and asked if she could still give them out later, just in case they changed their mind. That line hit me harder than anything else. Just in case they changed their mind. I realized I had spent my entire adult life hoping they'd change their minds about me, about my worth, about my place in the family. But they hadn't. They didn't need to. They had Mark, and I had always made it easy for them to treat me like backup. Not anymore. Mark and I worked in the same company, but in different divisions. I was recently promoted to Senior Operations Manager, a role with access to internal systems most people didn't even know existed. Budget reports, performance logs, client feedback, expense claims. It didn't take long before I started noticing things about Mark's team that didn't sit right. Meetings scheduled with clients who no longer existed. Travel reimbursements for locations that didn't match up with their sales territories. Duplicate invoices. consultants that looked suspiciously like fake names. It wasn't my job to audit his division, but I started building a file anyway. I kept it clean, no emotion, just documents, timestamps, and screenshots. Quiet, methodical, like I was folding laundry. I didn't have a plan yet, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. Then one afternoon in early January, I got pulled into a leadership meeting. Our CEO, Diane, was there, someone I had worked with before on a risk mitigation project. She was no nonsense and sharp as glass. She trusted me. After the meeting, I caught her in the hallway and asked if she had 5 minutes. I didn't give her names. I just told her I noticed a pattern in a few expense logs that didn't look right and offered to send her a report. She said yes. Simple as that. That night, I finalized the report. I stripped my name from everything, formatted it like a compliance flag raised by an anonymous team member. When I hit send, I didn't include a note, just the file. 3 days later, Mark was called into HR. He thought it was routine. Then he came out white as a sheet. I didn't say a word. He didn't call me. He called Mom. She called me, panicked, told me someone had accused Mark of serious misconduct. She said he might be suspended, that he was in shock. She asked me if I had heard anything. I told her no. She sighed like that confirmed everything. Like I was still the good one. But I wasn't the good one anymore. I was the one holding the match. And the fire was only just beginning. Mark messaged me 2 days after his meeting with HR. Can we talk? Not hi, not I'm sorry, not how's Ella. Just that. I agreed. Told him to meet me at a diner near the office. Not because I owed him anything. I just wanted to see his face when he realized the person he used to step on had finally moved the ground beneath him. He showed up looking worse than I'd ever seen him. Rumpled suit, eyes tired, like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down without a word and stared at the table for a second. Then he launched into it. Said someone had made a big deal out of nothing. That the company was hunting for scapegoats. That everyone pads a few numbers. That fake meetings were basically standard in his division, and no one cared until now. I waited. Then he said it. You're close with Diane, right? You could talk to her. Just explain I'm not a bad guy. There was the assumption that I'd clean up his mess, that I'd do what I always did, protect him, fix things behind the scenes, play the responsible one while he walked away untouched. But this time, he didn't realize the room was on fire because I lit the match. I didn't laugh, I didn't argue. I just looked at him and said I couldn't help. He didn't push it, just nodded, stood up, and walked out like it was just another failed pitch meeting. 2 days later, he was gone. No announcement. His name scrubbed from the employee portal. His inbox disabled. LinkedIn quietly updated to open to new opportunities. I kept waiting to feel something. Guilt, relief, triumph. Instead, it was just quiet. Then something strange happened. 3 nights after his termination, I walked past Ella's room and saw her going through the closet. She had a box of gifts, small ones, a drawing for each cousin, a bracelet, a letter written on holiday stationery that said things like, "You're the best at video games, and I hope we hang out more this year." I thought she'd forgotten about those. She hadn't. She asked if she could still give them their gifts, said it didn't feel right to keep them. I told her we'd figure something out. That night, when it was dark, I left the package at Mark's front door. No note, no explanation. Just the small box wrapped in silver paper. The next morning, I got a text from Mark. "I know that was you. Thank you." I didn't answer, and that should have been the end of it. But later that day, around 4 p.m., I got a message from a blocked number. No subject, just an attachment. It was a screenshot of the internal report I had sent to Diane, the same one I scrubbed clean of any identifiers. Only now my file name was visible at the top. Operations. My initials plain as day. My stomach dropped. I sat still for a full minute, not because I was scared, but because I realized something I hadn't considered. Mark wasn't just careless. He was vindictive. And someone in that office, someone I trusted, had sent him the file. He wasn't just out of work. He was looking for someone to blame, and now he knew exactly where to point the finger. The moment I saw the file name, operations_underview.pdf, I knew I had miscalculated. Not just Mark, everyone around him. Someone in the company had forwarded him the report I sent to Diane. Someone close enough to me to have seen it. Someone I probably said good morning to without knowing they were sliding knives into my back. For a few minutes, I just stared at the screen. The initials were mine. The format was mine. And the damage that was coming. Mark hadn't texted again after his short-lived gratitude over Ella's gift box. But this was a message. No words, just the screenshot. As if to say, I know, and now I'm coming for you." I didn't respond. I didn't tell Diane. I didn't do anything. Not right away. I went to work the next morning like nothing had happened. Smiled. Sat in meetings. Answered questions. But I felt it. The shift. People looked at me too quickly, or not at all. I saw two of Mark's old team members whispering in the kitchen when I walked in. They stopped when they saw me. One of them gave me a weird half smile, like they were trying to remember if they liked me or not. The feeling was unmistakable. Suspicion. Then, 4 days later, Diane called me in. She wasn't warm. She wasn't cold either. She was Diane. Composed, impossible to read. She told me Mark had contacted her, that he claimed I'd orchestrated everything because of a personal family issue, that I had access to tools other employees didn't. He claimed I selectively edited data, manipulated logs, that I made him a target. I asked her if she believed him. She didn't answer the question. She just said they were opening a formal review. Protocol. Temporary access restrictions. Nothing disciplinary, just caution. I wasn't being punished. Not officially. But I'd been here long enough to know what this meant. Once there's doubt, you're already halfway out the door. Then she pulled out a printed email. Anonymous complaint from someone in Mark's division. Apparently, I'd been overheard in the break room saying, "Sometimes people need to be taught a lesson." I searched my memory. Maybe I said something like that in passing. Maybe I didn't. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. It was enough to justify the review. When I left her office, I didn't go back to my desk. I walked outside and sat in my car. Just sat there with the engine off. I wasn't scared. Not really. I'd done everything by the book. But I was shaken. Not because of what they believed. Because I had been careful, and someone still found a way in. At home, Ella was sitting on the couch waiting for me with a stack of books and a handwritten museum list. She had been researching exhibits she wanted to see that weekend. I sat next to her and nodded as she went through them. I smiled when she showed me the one about volcanoes. But all I could think about was how close I was to becoming the villain in a story I wrote to protect her. That night I couldn't sleep. I pulled out my old external drive, the one I hadn't touched in years. It was a backup from a time when I used to help Mark with projects on weekends, when I used to clean up his messy proposals, when I still believed he'd grow into the position he was handed. What I found on that drive stopped me cold. There were files I'd forgotten. Notes. Drafts. Raw versions of proposals he had submitted under his name. Voice memos. Old ones. Where he dictated whole emails and asked me to reword them to make them sound smarter. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Just a sister helping her brother. But looking at it now, all together in a clean little folder with timestamps and metadata, I realized something. I didn't need to defend myself. I just needed to remind the company exactly who built the version of Mark they thought they knew. I had been quiet long enough. The folder was more than just old work. It was a record of everything Mark had taken credit for, right down to the phrasing, the formatting. I opened a PDF from 4 years ago, a client pitch he won an internal award for, and there it was, my watermark, faint in the corner. I hadn't even noticed it at the time. Back then, I was helping him get ahead. Now it was evidence, proof that without me, he never would have gotten in the door, let alone up the ladder. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, but I also felt clear. The mistake I made before was thinking Mark would stop, that taking his job was enough, that he'd sulk, lick his wounds, and vanish. I forgot who he was, a man who couldn't stand the idea that someone might see him as second best, especially me. Now he was trying to drag me down just to stay level, and I was done being polite about it. I spent the next 2 nights building a full report. Every project I'd ghostwritten for him, every proposal I'd touched, voice memos with his requests, Slack messages from years ago where he begged for help minutes before a meeting. I layered everything with dates, file versions, metadata, screenshots, no flair, just facts. Then I emailed Diane directly. I didn't say Mark is lying. I didn't say I'm being targeted. I said, here is the timeline of every piece of work I've contributed to Mark's performance in the last 6 years. I believe this context will help you evaluate the current claims fairly. And I attached the file. I expected silence. I got a meeting request. When I walked into Diane's office, the mood was different. She wasn't looking at me like I was under review anymore. She asked how long I had been helping Mark behind the scenes. I told her since day one. I admitted I had enabled it, that I let it happen for too long. She didn't nod. She didn't smile. She just said one thing. Why didn't you come forward earlier? I didn't answer, because the real answer was embarrassing. Because I thought it was family. Because I thought keeping peace mattered more than being respected. By the end of the week, the internal investigation was over. The retaliation claims were dismissed. And quietly, so quietly I almost missed it, the employee who leaked the file was gone. Apparently, they'd forwarded internal documents to Mark using a personal email. Violation of data policy. Immediate termination. I never asked who it was. I didn't care. They made their choice. What caught me off guard was what happened next. HR reached out, not to discipline, but to offer me a new role, higher clearance, cross-department oversight, a quiet acknowledgement of what I'd done. No press release, no celebration, just a new email signature and a line in my file that read, "Internal conflict resolved with professionalism." That should have been the end of it. But then, about a week later, I got a voicemail from Mark. Not angry, not apologetic, desperate. "Lynn, I need help. I can't get a single interview. Word's gotten around. No one's calling back. I know you're mad, but you're the only one who knows how this works. Please just tell me what to do." I stared at the phone for a long time. This man who once told me my daughter was a bit much, who erased me from every success he ever had, who laughed when we were excluded at Christmas. Now he was asking me for help. I didn't respond. I didn't delete the voicemail either. And I didn't feel satisfied like I thought I would. I felt something else. I kept the voicemail. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself it happened. Maybe because some part of me still needed proof that Mark had finally said the one thing he never had before. "I need you." But I didn't call him back. I couldn't. Not because I wanted revenge anymore. That part had passed. It was something else now. Something heavier. For weeks I told myself it was justice. That he deserved to fall. That everything he lost was because of choices he made, not because of anything I did. And that was technically true. But it didn't sit the way I thought it would. I had won quietly. Completely. He was unemployed. His reputation was damaged. Every door he knocked on was closed, and he had no idea that I was the reason they stayed that way. But winning didn't feel clean. It felt like something I couldn't undo. I started avoiding mirrors. Not literally, just the kind of reflection that sneaks up on you when everything's quiet and no one needs anything from you. The kind that asks questions you can't answer. Like, when exactly did I stop trying to protect Ella and start trying to destroy him? Or did I really do all of this for her? Or was I just tired of being the one everyone stepped over? I didn't talk to anyone about it, not even Ella. She was back to normal, or at least what normal looked like for a kid who'd learned too early what being left out feels like. She never asked about her cousins again, never mentioned Christmas. She just moved on. Kids are good at that. Adults, not so much. One night, weeks later, I found myself rereading that voicemail. Not listening, just reading the transcript. The desperation in it. The way he finally saw what it meant to be ignored. And I hated that a part of me liked it. That was the worst part of all of this. I hadn't just exposed Mark. I had exposed something in myself, something cold, capable of precision and silence. He had underestimated me. They all had. But I had underestimated myself too. I thought I was just trying to protect my daughter. But somewhere along the way, I became the kind of person who knew exactly how to ruin someone. And did. Now he's out there, fumbling through job boards and LinkedIn DMs, trying to explain why his glowing resume leads nowhere. I know he still doesn't suspect me. Not really. Maybe deep down, but not enough to say it out loud. And I'm still here, still working, still showing up like nothing happened. Sometimes I wonder if he'll ever put it all together.